This video will cover the essentials of procedure registration in the Neurizon Neuromodulation database. First, we should note that very many procedures performed in neuromodulation treatment are highly complex. Let's just, as an example, imagine a revision of a spinal cord stimulation trial patient where you explant one lead and replace it by another, you reposition or revise another lead, and you implant an impulse generator. That's all being performed by two surgeons who handle different parts of the procedure. This is very difficult to document accurately and unambiguously without a very, very complex surgery form, or even worse, resorting to free text registration. That's a thing we're trying to avoid because it's very hard to analyze, and basically a free text registration is not much better than just writing it down on a piece of paper. In the Neurizon Neuromodulation database, we have chosen the path that we split procedures into smaller parts. We realize that any procedure is either an implantation, that means implanting something that doesn't already exist in a patient, revising something, that means altering something that is already implanted in this patient, or explant something, that means removing something that's already implanted in a patient, or it may be a combination of the above. Also, we note that any neuromodulation procedure is either concerned with a lead or a catheter, or with a pulse generator or a drug pump, or it may be a combination of the above. That means that if we take the procedure that we listed at the first slide, a revision of a spinal cord stimulation patient where we explant a lead and replace it by another, we reposition a lead and we implant an impulse generator, would, in our approach, result in the following procedure registrations: explantation lead, implantation lead, of the new lead that is, revision lead, and implantation IPG. You may think that this seems a little bit cumbersome, and it also does involve some duplicate work, but the great advantage is that each form is very quickly completed. It takes about 45 to 60 seconds each. You don't lose any information due to very confusingly complex forms. The approach also gives a very clear picture of the total procedure performed. I'll demonstrate that in a short while. And also, each part of the procedure is accurately and unambiguously documented. That means that we can accurately link any possible complications to all the details of a specific part of the procedure, including who did it, how did they do it, and with what did they do it. Also, we made sure that all procedure forms follow roughly the same structure. It has the advantage of keeping the structure familiar, and it also greatly eases data management later on because variables are reused. As a general feature for all procedure registrations is, first of all, indication: why is this procedure being performed? In the case of implantation lead and implantation catheter, the indications are retrieved from the information you have already entered into the clinical data form. In case of revision or explantation, there is a list of choices, so you can choose why, not the patient why is being treated, but why you perform this procedure, that is, why do you choose to revise or explant this particular piece of equipment. Of course, you should register the center where is the procedure being performed, and also who performed the procedure. As standard, there is a primary surgeon for each part of the procedure, that is the implanter mainly responsible for this procedure. But you can also choose a secondary surgeon who will then share responsibility with the primary surgeon. You can choose an assistant who works under the supervision of the primary surgeon and has technically no individual responsibility for the procedure. And also, you can choose a supervisor, somebody who may or may not be involved in the procedure, but who supervises the primary surgeon. And just to return to the complex example we listed in the first slide, an SCS patient with two existing leads. One lead is being replaced by another, the other lead is revised, and IPG is implanted. As I said, in our approach, that would be explantation lead, implantation lead, revision lead, and implantation IPG, and I will go over that now. If we return to the patient that we have already been working with, you will see now that his patient file keeps expanding right here in the left side of the screen. And you may notice, if you've been seeing the other videos, that now I have just chosen to implant two leads on the 1st of August, where we have registered the start of our treatment. And this is just as an example. This patient is then thought to be a trial SCS patient with two leads, and we'll go over the procedures that we just mentioned. So, in order first to explant the lead that we do not want, we go to New, Procedure, Explantation, Lead. As always, register the date where you perform the procedure. Let's say that is today. That would be 30 days after the original procedure. And why do you choose to explant this lead? Let's say that in this case we have a verified axial lead migration. It's being done at our institution. Let's say that I did it, and let us say that I was kindly being helped by Jens Christian Sørensen. You can write any notes here, for instance, if the name of the implanter does not appear in the list. And if you click here, you will get a list of all the implanted leads in this particular patient. Let us say that it is the lead that is registered here to the far right of midline at C4 that has migrated. We click on that one so we know which one it is. The patient is lying face down. At our center, we use a combination of local anesthesia and sedation, and we usually use a penicillin derivative. So that is it. Now you've registered that we have explanted a lead, who did it, and why we did it, and which lead has been explanted. So now we're going to implant another lead as a replacement for that. Go to Procedure, this time Implantation, Lead SCS Percutaneous. We're doing this today again. And now the indication for this procedure is why do we choose to treat the patient? And in this case, you would see the indications that you noted under clinical data: his stump pain and his phantom pain. Let us say that our prime indication is his stump pain, but you also have the option of noting a secondary indication if there's a secondary indication for implanting this particular lead. Let's say that we hope to get rid of his phantom pain as well. The implanting center will still be our institution, the primary surgeon in this case. It may be me who explant the lead, but let us say that it is Jens Christian Sørensen who chose to implant the other lead, and I'm giving him a hand with it. Here you can choose if the lead was successfully implanted. If you have a lead implantation attempt that failed for one reason or the other, we encourage you also to write here that this procedure has been performed, but the lead has not been implanted, and possibly also write down why it was not so, because there might also be complications related to failed attempt, and you would also later on need to know why did this particular attempt fail. Was it a lead that was too big for this patient, or was the patient uncooperative, and so forth. I should say that this video is no endorsement or the reverse of any particular piece of equipment or any manufacturer. At our institution, we just mostly use St. Jude Medical, so that's why I choose this in this case. Let's say it's an St. Jude Medical Octro that's being implanted, 60 centimeters. You can write the serial number of the lead here. And let's say that we implant it right where we originally had it, to the far right of the midline at the level of C5. You can write any notes about the lead here that you might find necessary. We usually use the standard anchor. And if you want to use a serial number for the anchor, that's also possible. In this case, we would choose an existing extension. You can register, as you see here, a new extension, also extension from a different manufacturer than the lead, since some people choose cross extension, so to speak. The patient would be lying face down. The anesthesia would still be local and sedation at our institution. We use penicillin derivative. Our puncture technique would always, in our institution, be loss of resistance with water. And let's say that we enter at T3, T4. You can write any notes here in free text about the implantation you find necessary, and press save. This procedure, or rather this registration of the procedure, can be performed in less than 60 seconds if you're used to it and if you know what you've been doing. So now we registered the explant of the migrated lead. We register the implantation of a new lead. Now let's go to revision of the lead that we had, the other lead that we had. Let's say we did it today. And the indication for the revision might be, for instance, that we have insufficient coverage or insufficient effect. Let's say that we want to the lead just a segment or so. The revising center would still be the same. The primary surgeon for this procedure or this part of the procedure might be me, and I may be doing it alone this time. The lead that was being revised, now we have 3 leads implanted over time. So you see one of them has been explanted, so it's probably not the one we want. And the other 2 are implanted, and in this case it was the lead to the right of the midline that we want to revise. We're still placing it to the right of the midline, but let's say that we are just dragging it down to C6, for instance. You can write in notes here. Again, you can write, if you switch the anchor, you can write here which anchor you chose to use. Let's say that this time we used then a cinch anchor or something else. You can write a serial number here for the anchor, a serial number for the lead you already registered at the original implantation. We use an existing extension, still lying face down, still getting local anesthesia and sedation, and still with a penicillin derivative, and save. And the final part of this procedure is that we implant the IPG. We go to procedure, implantation, IPG. Again on the same date. Again the same institution. Let's say that in this case, Jes Christian Sørensen performed the implantation of the battery, and I took my part of the procedure. And let's say that it's still a St. Jude Medical. Again, this is not to endorse a specific manufacturer. It's just for the example. The IPG could be, for instance, an Ian. You can write a serial number here, which would be good in case of product recall or something else like that. The location at our institution would usually be the buttock. Let's say we put it on the right side. And here you can register which leads are being connected to which positions. It is very useful later on when you're going to do programming of the lead and you can't really remember which one goes where. So let's say at the first slot we have the octro that went at C4, and the second slot we had the octro that went at C5. Let's just be sure that we chose the implanted lead. That would probably be better. So at slot 1 we have the one that's far to the right of midline, and at the other slot we have the one that's just to the right of the midline. You can write any notes about the IPG here. The patient was still lying face down, still at local anesthesia and sedation, and the antibiotic prophylaxis was still penicillin derivative. So even with all this talk on the way, we managed to register a very complex 4 procedure quickly and accurately, and you will see it's all being gathered here under the small note that said procedure on the 1st of September. And later on, it's easy to retrieve and it's easy to register any complications related to a specific part of the procedure.